Japan lands on the moon, Ingenuity dies, China has its own grasshopper, and Intuitive Machines gets ready to fly to the moon. All coming up on the next Orbital Edge. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Orbital Edge News, a brand new show for passionate spaceflight fans. I am your host Chad, and let's get right into some launches that has happened recently. And we begin with the Kinetica 1 mission from China. This launch occurred Tuesday, January 23rd at 4:03 UTC at the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in China. This mission set out to deliver 5 satellites using the Lijian 1 Y3 rocket. However, not much is known about the purpose of the mission or even the specifics of the launch vehicle itself. This launcher is part of a private space company, and this is one of the main reasons we have a lack of data on this. And next up, we have a Vulcan 9 with the Starlink mission. The landing footage is seen here from Vandenberg. Let's check it out. This launch occurred at 12:35 Universal Coordinated Time at Space Launch Complex 4 East in Vandenberg, California. After several delays, the mission finally gets off the ground after poor weather over the week. This mission burped out 22 Starlink next-gen satellites, and the first stage landed perfectly on the drone ship out in the Pacific. And again, up next, we have another Falcon 9 launch, and this time it's the Axiom 3 mission. Let's watch the awesome footage that's carrying 4 crew members.
Full power, and liftoff. Go Axiom 3.
This launch was the Axiom 3 mission, and liftoff occurred at 4:49 Eastern Standard Time or 21:49 Universal Coordinated Time at Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida. This crew mission takes 4 European astronauts to the ISS and marks the first all-European crew to do so off of U.S. soil. If you would like to know more about this mission, check out our space pod where we go more in depth and also provide our own exclusive footage of the liftoff. And next we have another launch from China. This time it's from the mighty Long March 7 rocket. This time we get some lengthy footage. Let's check it out.
5、4、3、2、1，点火！点火！
This Long March 7 launch lifted off from the Weichang Space Launch Site in China on January 15th at 14:27 UTC. This mission carried out the 6th cargo mission to the China space station. This rocket is a 3-stage launcher with 4 solid boosters and a kerosene-powered liquid engine for stages 1 and 2. The final stage uses a liquid hydrogen-fueled engine which gives extra delta V performance in delivering its payload, in addition to solving the China track record at sporting highly toxic fuels as a propellant such as UDMH. That wraps up launches, and now for some epic space news that has happened over the last week. And of course, starting with the Japan moon landing, that's been all the rave over the past week. And this lander landed on January 20th. The lander was called SLIM, and SLIM stands for Smart Lander for Investigating Moon. Japan is now the 5th country to land on the moon. Japan joins the ranks of China, Russia, the United States, and India, and all the countries that have successfully landed an unmanned or manned spacecraft on the lunar surface. The landing did not go perfectly as planned, however. They did land on target, and the lander was supposed to flip 90 degrees and land on its side. However, there were a few problems after landing. Most notably, about 50 meters before touchdown, the thrusters dropped their thrust unexpectedly, and it landed on top as a result of the lack of thruster control. Also, another issue with the spacecraft that they learned was that the solar cells were not generating any power. So this means that the spacecraft is not going to be alive any much longer. And next up on space news, this is more of a recent development, and it's actually not great news at all. Bill Nelson at NASA, he's the administrator of NASA. He had just did a press release on the situation with Ingenuity, the Mars helicopter. And we're going to just show a photo of what the spacecraft looks like. And after 72 flights, this little spacecraft that could has taken its last breath. Administrator Bill Nelson just made a statement a few hours ago before filming of the show. Let's take a moment and hear what he has to say on this.
It is bittersweet that I must announce that Ingenuity, the little helicopter that could, and it kept saying, I think I can, I think I can. Well, it has now taken its last flight on Mars. As it was coming down for a landing, at least one of its carbon fiber rotor blades was damaged. We're investigating the possibility that the blade struck the ground. This is what the blade looks like. It's a special fiber with a special contour. That little helicopter could fly in a 1% atmosphere, not 100% atmosphere like we have on Earth. It cut through a 1% atmosphere and was able to fly. And what Ingenuity accomplished far exceeds what we thought possible.
Now moving on with some more space news, we have a Falcon 9 grasshopper type thing going on in China. So this company's called Land Space, and it's their take on reusability. Let's watch this awesome video just to kind of show you what it's all about. So what we saw was called the ZQ-3 rocket. It consists of 9 methalox engines, and methalox simply means liquid methane and liquid oxygen as the bipropellants. Now this is a private space company that is based out in China, and they have been actually launching since 2018 with their ZQ-1 and ZQ-2. Their ZQ-1 and ZQ-2 rockets. I'm really excited for China to proceed with this, and they have been actually, with the successful tests and everything, I'm definitely rooting for them, and best of luck to Land Space, and their planned 2025 inaugural launch. Now next up in news, we've got something by Intuitive Machines. They have revealed that they're about to go for launch in mid-February for their attempt at a moonshot. I know we talked about on the show last week about the ill-fated Peregrine moonlander. So we're gonna get another shot at getting a private company to get their lander on the moon, and this is called the Nova C lander. The mission's called the IM-1 mission, and it's set to launch on a Falcon 9. And this will be Intuitive Machines' attempt at a NASA Commercial Lunar Payload Services Initiative, also known as CLPS, and it's going to be a key part of NASA's Artemis lunar exploration efforts. Shuttle Endeavour gets a makeover. Well, but the shuttle's retired. What's going on? Well, if you see in this photo here, this is actually speaking about the museum that the shuttle is at. Currently, the shuttle was just an orbiter sitting inside of a building, and now it's going to be a full upright stack, including the orbiter. And this is going to be located in the California Science Center in Los Angeles. And they have about 2 years to go for constructing this thing. Now, if you look at this picture here, this is possibly the 2 last people to ever sit inside the Endeavour cockpit. Probably. So the master plan is to construct the stack first and build the museum around it as the stack's being constructed. They did a similar thing with the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, where the shuttle Atlantis was built on the inside. However, unlike the Atlantis Center, the shuttle boosters and liquid fuel tank sits outside of the Atlantis Center, and the orbiter is sitting, and it hangs on a big set of, like a gantry system. where the shuttle just hangs at a 45-degree angle. Looks really cool. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you get out to the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex and check it out. For some more space news, how about a static fire? This static fire was about 8.5 minutes or 500 seconds to simulate a full first stage ascent. This was performed at the Stennis Space Center in Missouri. And last, for the space news, we've got something with Impulse Space. They had introduced a new kick stage, and that is set to be flying in 2026. This will be compatible with a crap ton of launchers, including the Terran R, Vulcan, New Glenn, Starship, Falcon Heavy, and the Falcon 9, with future compatibility announced after more launchers enter the market. It's a staged combustion engine that is mounted on this thing, and it provides 15 kilonewtons of thrust. The fuel on board is going to be liquid methane and liquid oxygen. It's expected to carry about 5 tons of payload into geostationary orbit, and it's supposed to do it really fast. In addition, this has about 3 to 9 kilometers a second of delta V, and all I can say is absolutely stunning performance. This kick stage would be the first ever liquid methane powered kick stage. It's awesome to see many Methalock engines emerging into the launch market. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, the main topic of the show: should the Delta II be directly replaced? More coming up. Stay tuned. And welcome back. We are in Max Q of the program, which means we get to dive right into the main topic of the show. Should the Delta II be replaced by a brand new launch vehicle by United Launch Alliance? Let's start with my personal take on it. Yes, there should be a direct replacement to the Delta II rocket, because currently, the Vulcan is not replacing the Delta IV Heavy. The Vulcan actually replaces the Atlas V and the Delta IV Medium. With that said, they also need to actually replace the Delta IV Heavy. My personal take on replacing the Delta II, for example, would be something maybe a 3-meter diameter liquid fuel tank, something with an upper stage with 2RL-10 engines, or maybe a twin AJ2 engine. Now, for something that could replace the Delta IV Heavy, they could have maybe a 6-diameter meter core. For an upper stage, they could sport the stopped development JX2 engines, which was supposed to be an improvement over the J2 engine. With the first stage, they could probably maybe either continue to use the BE4 engines from Blue Origin, or even build a brand new engine in-house. So with that out of the way, I do want to get this comment that did pop up out of the way. Pipcard off of Reddit asked, does anyone know why the core stage of the Delta II was blue in color? Well, the answer to that is because the designers said so. Actually, no, it's not the color of the paint that makes it blue. It's the color the primer gave off. They later learned that it was just cheaper to not paint over the primer the white color. So ever since, I think it was like the mid-60s, don't quote me on this, that they stopped painting over the primer. And obviously this was just to save on cost and a little bit of weight. So here comes another comment actually that's more towards the topic of the show. This comes from Jamie Sala. I hope I pronounced that right. This is off of Reddit. Why did Chevy develop the Camaro after Ford launched the Mustang? Why did McDonald's develop the Big Mac after Burger King announced the Whopper? Why did Airbus develop the A380 in response to the Boeing 747? In business, if you don't keep pace with the competition, you lose customers. The Vulcan Centaur is a modular rocket that actually replaces both the Atlas V and the Delta IV Heavy. Of course, what I just said earlier on the show is something actually has to replace the Delta IV Heavy because the Vulcan Center does not properly replace the Delta IV Heavy. I had just recently seen a statistic chart that Everyday Astronaut, he compared the Delta IV and the Vulcan and a few other rockets, and his chart showed that the Delta IV Heavy actually almost doubles the performance of the Vulcan. Now, I would show this chart, but I didn't get permission in time to get it released, so I can be able to show it on here. That's okay. I had written down my own notes. So in a nutshell, with almost doubled the thrust while carrying almost twice the fuel, it also boasts 12% of an increase in engine ISP. The results here is that the Delta IV Heavy is going to be able to push a little bit more weight into geostationary and geosynchronous orbits. And if you would like to learn a little bit more where I got the data from, go ahead and visit Everyday Astronaut. And also follow his YouTube channel where he actually shows the statistic chart. When we come back, comments from the last show. Stay tuned, don't go away. And welcome back. Before we jump into the comments, I'd like to thank all the commenters and collaborators that have helped make this show engaging. With that said, we are in orbit, and let's get to the first comment. This comment comes off of Twitter from Alexander Mack. Why did the first stage of the New Glenn go past the vehicle assembly building when that is the long route instead of taking the NASA Causeway directly to the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station? Well, it's a simple answer because there's a significant elevation change on the causeway going straight to the base. If you look at the photo here, this looks like something that is not going to climb hills. So with that said, I hope that does answer your question. Elon Musk from Twitter asks, that's a clever name. During the Vulcan live stream, you can see a shot of mission control, and it easily has almost 2 to 2.5 times the amount of employees there. Whenever I see a non-crew Falcon 9 launch, there seems to be maybe 6 or 8 people in the room. What gives? I'm going to answer this in 2 different ways. The short answer is just that there are simply more jobs during the time of a new launch vehicle. The more thorough answer here is the mission itself adds more to this specific launch. Compared to SpaceX, they have much of their workforce spread out. Additionally, there's a huge chunk of SpaceX workers in Hawthorne, California, and this is mainly to handle a lot of the operations that they have out in the Vandenberg Launch Complex. What you are seeing is a special instance of controllers, partners, and data analysts that all flew into Cape Canaveral for this specific mission. We've reached escape velocity, which means that completes the show. But before we go, we'd like to give the answer to the orbital trivia question, and that's kerosene and liquid oxygen. If you enjoyed this episode, you can support us in the future by participating in our social media discussions and the discussions here on the show. We will see you next time.